One of our favorite secret weapons for problem solving and negotiating is local real estate attorney Brian Lytle. In this series of Get Smart, Brian shares his insights about corporations as a buyer or seller.
Hi, I'm attorney Brian Lytle, and in today's Get Smart segment, we're going to take a look at corporations as a buyer or a seller in the context of a real estate contract and a real estate transaction. Before we get into the meat of it, let me remind you this is not specific legal advice. That's always dependent on particular facts and circumstances and documents if appropriate. Rather, this is just a broad overview. And in this area, the Liz Moore and Associates business geographic area, there are three contracts that are used. The RAIN contract, which is used on the Virginia Peninsula, the CVR contract, which is used in the Richmond metropolitan area, and then the VR contract, which is used statewide, but in our context, it's used by Liz Moore in the Williamsburg area and most firms in Williamsburg. Each of those contracts handles things a bit differently, but in our context, they're really all the same. And all are fairly drafted in any event for both buyers and sellers, and it's in that manner or regard that a Liz Moore and Associates agent can represent you as either a buyer or a seller and use the same contract. So the purpose of this Get Smart segment is to take a look at corporations as a buyer or seller. But if you have any questions, ask your Liz Moore and Associates agent, and he or she can either help you or direct you to the appropriate person. So, what is a corporation? Well, I think we all pretty much know what that is, but to be precise about it, it's a business entity, in our context authorized by Virginia law. Either it was formed in Virginia or it's authorized to do business in Virginia. So, if you're a corporation or have a corporation and you're going to move forward in a real estate transaction, please take a look and make sure at the onset that it's actually in good standing with the State Corporation Commission. Particularly with small corporations, what we call closely held, one owner, two owners, small, that kind of thing. Those owners all too often, through oversight, don't pay the annual dues or file the annual reports with the State Corporation Commission that are required. And so the corporation's existence under Virginia law can be suspended or terminated, and that's a problem. We can typically fix that, but it takes time, so we don't want to find this out a day or two before closing. From a documentation standpoint, for the closing, at a minimum, we're going to need to see the Articles of Incorporation. That's the document that was initially filed with the State Corporation Commission to form it. And there'll be a certificate to that effect. We'll need the corporation's bylaws. Most people know what bylaws are. They're kind of the written rules that the corporation follows. Ultimately, in order to prove that it exists with the State Corporation Commission, we'll request and receive what's known as a certificate of good standing. And it's really just a formal document from the SCC saying, yes, this corporation exists and it's in good standing. And then from there, ultimately, we're going to need a resolution of the Board of Directors. And that resolution is going to authorize typically the president of the corporation to sign the documents necessary to buy or sell real estate, sign loan documents if a loan is involved, and that kind of thing. So those are really the minimum documents. Sometimes there are other documents required, but the idea here is to start on this early, not start on it later, a day or two before closing. So get that in the works. And then in terms of who signs, well, it depends. But as I mentioned a moment ago, it's typically the president acting under a resolution of the Board of Directors for the corporation. So how do you sign? Well, the first thing you want to make sure is that the name of the corporation is actually correct and matches what it should be under the State Corporation Commission records. In this case, Lytle Title and Escrow, Inc., that I've used as a sample. Lytle Title is actually an LLC, but let's just pretend it's a corporation here. So a typical signature line looks like this: the name of the corporation, by, In this case, that's my B that kind of hard to do with a mouse, so it doesn't look too great, but in the event, it suffices as a signature. And then since I'm signing in a representative capacity for the corporation, I put my name, comma, and then that representative capacity. In this case, it's a president. So corporations are pretty straightforward and usually pretty easy. You just need to make sure it exists properly, so get the documentation together, list it correctly in the contract. But as always, if you have any questions, reach out to your Liz Moore & Associates agent, and he or she can either answer those questions or direct you as appropriate. Thanks, and have a great day.
Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for our next installment of Get Smart with Brian Lytle.